This is the nation station, WLW in Cincinnati, your Clear Channel service.
So we repeat the bulletin just received from Dallas, Texas. Lee H. Oswald, a young man in his 20s, black curly hair, was arrested in the theater in Dallas as the prime suspect in the assassination of President Kennedy. He scuffled with the police. He wounded one of the police. And when he was finally subdued, after a pistol was taken away from him, he said, well, it's all over now. So all of the evidence points to the fact that the police of Dallas are on the track of a very tragic connection involving the death of the President of the United States. There was a slight further detail on that point. Oswald worked in the building from which the shots were fired at the President. His supervisor said he was there at noon. That was a warehouse about 8 stories high. The shot was fired from a 5th or a 6th-story window. That has not been definitely determined yet. And there were workmen in the building refurbishing it for some reason or another. There were no tenants at the time in the building. So Oswald was a worker in this building, and he had been there at noon, was seen there by his supervisor.
A man has been arrested, Lee Oswald, a 24-year-old man who said 2 years ago he wanted Russian citizenship, is being questioned to see whether he had any connection with the assassination of President Kennedy. Under questioning now by police, reliable sources indicate he's the man, according to the questions that have been asked and the way he has answered them. The rifle that was used to kill the president has been picked up by police. Ballistics tests are being undertaken at this time. Oswald was an Oak Cliff, Dallas man, Oak Cliff, a section of Dallas, and he's undergoing questioning now, and sources that we have talked to indicate that he is the man. That's the latest story. Morgan, federal officers have been going over the man very closely for a considerable period of time now. The witnesses to the president's assassination are in the next room at police headquarters, but they have not yet looked at the man. As we told you, the rifle used for the president's assassination has been recovered and is undergoing fingerprint analysis at this time. Now, the report to us is now that Oswald was picked up in New Orleans not long ago and fined $10 for distributing communist literature. That's the latest story on Oswald. He has not been charged yet, but is undergoing rigid interrogation at Dallas Police Headquarters.
Well, it is significant that
the report we have right now is that Governor Connolly, also shot, is reported in satisfactory condition. Dr. Robert Shaw says he'll have to stay in the hospital at least 2 weeks. Also, we have an eyewitness report to the shooting, and would like for you to hear that now.
I am L.J. Lewis, 500 East Jefferson Avenue in Oak Cliff. And we were sitting in the office here, and we heard the shots. And I just casually made a remark. I said, I bet they have him cornered. And so I looked up the street and saw the suspect coming down the street, and he was reloading his revolver and stuck it in his belt when he got, just across the street from us. And he turned and went up the street, and I immediately phoned the police, and one of the boys here in the office, Warren Reynolds, and Pat Patterson, they followed the suspect up the street where he turned behind the service station and to the alley. I immediately phoned the police, and Warren and Pat Patterson, followed the suspect on up the street. And after that, it's just a matter of time, till all the police and everything were around here.
That was
a salesman traveling on the road called the newsroom at WFAA and made mention of the fact that as he heard the information of President Kennedy's death on the radio while traveling through Waco, north through Texas on the highways, he noticed that all along the way, truck drivers were pulled off to the side of the road and in parking areas, and they were openly weeping and sobbing. Passengers in cars had pulled off to the road and were talking quietly in a numbed manner. Also, some were weeping. The entire scene on the Texas highways reflected the sadness of President Kennedy's demise. All social and civic functions have been canceled in the Dallas area for the weekend, too. Dallas schools, however, did remain in session.
Thank you, Roger. Ready. One final note, Morgan. Mrs. Jacqueline Kennedy at Parkland Hospital took her ring off and put it on John F. Kennedy's hand. She lifted the president's hand and kissed it. One final note. That's the story from Dallas, Morgan Beatty.
Thank you.
Wlw-Radio is suspending our regularly scheduled programs during this time of mourning for our late president, John F. Kennedy. We ask you to join with us in prayers for John Kennedy, his family, and President Lyndon Johnson. At this time, we would like to introduce various notables here in the area of the Ohio Valley. The impact of the news of the president's assassination went round the world. It was a blow to the common man as well as to the leaders of the nation and the world. Here in Cincinnati, people reacted as though they had suffered a personal loss, as though a bomb had dropped. Crowd gathered downtown as they listened. As the news trickled in about the president, the people stood quietly, saying little, and there were tears showing in the eyes of some. The flags throughout the city, as in the rest of the nation, were dropped at half-mast as the first word of Kennedy's death reached them. The shock was so great that Lieutenant Mering in the helicopter flying over the Queen City area reported a heavy exodus of vehicles from the downtown. And apparently, people were so overwhelmed by the news that they just left their jobs and offices and went home. Here now, Mr. John T. Murphy, President of the Crosley Broadcasting Corporation.
Mr. John T. Murphy, President of Crosley Broadcasting Corporation.
The Crosley Broadcasting Corporation and its employees, as the rest of the nation, are deeply shocked by the untimely death of President Kennedy. His death has struck at the heart and conscience of America and the world, and his loss will be mourned for years to come. We of the Crosley Broadcasting Corporation join the rest of the nation in expressing our heartfelt sympathy to Mrs. Kennedy and the other members of the late president's family.
Thank you, Mr. Murphy.
Here in Cincinnati at the W.E. Hutton and Company, the stock board flashed the news of the president's death. People just stood and watched. No talk, no movement, just shock. The news hit the streets quickly, and the newsboy's cry sent pedestrians into a stunned reaction. The people on the streets reacted as they could. Some could speak, some could not. Reaction from business, religious, and civic leaders was immediate, and regardless of political affiliations, their feelings were all the same: shock, sorrow, anger, and dismay. These were some of the many to express their feelings for WLW. Congressman Rich, Republican of the 1st District of Ohio.
Congressman Rich, how did you feel when you first heard the news of the assassination?
Well, I feel terrible. I can't realize yet that it's true. After all, President Kennedy was a world leader, the leader of the free world. He was our president, president of everyone. And I am so personally deeply distressed. I know the whole nation is, and I'm sure the whole world will pray for the safety of America. My deepest sympathy to the Kennedy family, one of the greatest families in Americans' history.
Thank you, Congressman Rich.
These words from the former congressman from Cincinnati, chairman of the Hamilton County Republican Committee, Mr. Gordon Shearer.
Sheriff, what was your reaction to the death of the president?
Well, it's almost unbelievable that a tragedy like this can happen in the United States today. I have no idea what diabolical forces were behind this assassination, but it demonstrates clearly how dangerous to our security one or two persons can be. I only knew the president slightly, but this brutal killing has completely upset me, Glenn.
Thank you.
From a prominent Cincinnati civic leader and president of the Kroger Company, Mr. Joseph Hall.
Mr. Hall, what was your reaction to the death of President Kennedy?
Well, it was unbelievable to me that in this country and in this day of age that this could happen. It has been my privilege to attend several meetings in the White House and to listen to our president discussed many of the serious and important problems. One could not help but listen to him without realizing that he had a full grasp of what was happening in the country and an understanding of the problems and a sincere desire to try to do something about them. One could not leave the meeting without having the respect for our president.
This is Wlw-Radio in Cincinnati, now returning you to...